This is going to be interesting because I don't know a lot about technology and I don't know anything about barbecue. But I do have some pictures of buildings that we have built. And maybe just to start with, this is our home here in Copenhagen where we work. We built our own workplace on the tip of a pier, where we try to sort of imagine what happens when the industrial port is moving away. And we try to sort of imagine that we could be working in the middle of a park. So imagine that the pavement, the asphalt ends, and you have sand, and you have trees and plants from the coastal landscapes of Denmark. And even though it is a kind of raw industrial building in the middle of the port, when you look closer, it's actually quite welcoming. Everywhere it touches the ground, it invites you to sit on it. On the outside, every floor is connected to the outside, to a terrace, and every terrace is connected to the terrace above and the terrace below. So on any level, you can actually walk out the window and just walk down the facade of the building. Inside, we've tried to break down the barrier between the different levels, so that when you are trying to sort of find new solutions to new problems, it is the friction between your colleagues that is the most important. So every level is visually and physically connected to the level above and the level below. There's essentially this like ricocheting stair that takes you all the way from the ground floor to the roof. And finally, when you make it to the roof, we've created this almost like a roof park that is literally connected to the outside. So the entire building somehow becomes an extension of the urban landscape. And because the ports of our cities are these areas of transformation where the infrastructure of the past gives way for the social and cultural programs of the present, a lot of our work has been dealing with reimagining the waterfronts. Just a few examples. In New York, we created something we called the court scraper that combines the communal space of a Copenhagen courtyard with the verticality and the views of an American skyscraper. And the result is that you create this like mini, almost like a bonsai Central Park in the middle of Hell's Kitchen on the west side of Manhattan. In Amsterdam, we have imagined a city block where people live in a normal sort of a courtyard building, but the courtyard opens up to the port of Amsterdam, so you can literally sail and swim into the courtyard itself. The courtyard becomes almost like a gateway between land and water, and again somehow starts blurring down the boundaries that you normally see between the industrial port and the city where people live. It's also covered in photovoltaics. There's even a floating solar farm at the tip of the marina, helping power the building. In Norway, we imagined an art museum in a sculpture park. And the art museum literally serves as a bridge spanning from one side of the river to the other, a vertical gallery and a horizontal gallery. And even though it looks like a complex sculptural form, when you look closer, you can see it's actually made out of completely standard extruded aluminum profiles on the outside and timber elements on the inside. So you can say in many ways it's trying to achieve something extraordinary out of something ordinary. A lot of ordinary elements come together to create complex curves, but when you look closer, everything is actually made out of straight elements. So you can say that it's almost like a museum that is also a bridge and that is also a sculpture in a sculpture park. In Copenhagen, I live on on a decommissioned Norwegian ferry, essentially the infrastructure for traffic across the water that I've turned into a family home. So somehow taking custody of the old bones of a building and then trying to reimagine the place that would normally ferry people across the fjords of Bergen. How could that actually become a place where you could live? So in some way, like again, trying to sort of harness the possibilities that occur when times change, when economies change, when technologies change. And from my living room, where they used to park cars, I can see the sun rising over Copenhagen, another piece of infrastructure, in this case for turning waste into energy. And Copenhagen is so clean that the steam coming out of the chimney is actually cleaner than the air of Copenhagen. So we could turn the facade into the tallest climbing wall in the world. If you are an extremely good climber, you can scale 100 meters of man-made mountain, or you can ride the elevator and you can sort of admire all the technology that scrubs particles and filters the fumes to actually make the steam as clean as it is. And of course, on the roof, you'll find a man-made mountain where you can hike and picnic and downhill ski. Denmark famously never wins any medals in the Winter Olympics. We got nothing in Sochi and nothing in Beijing. We hope one day we can change that fact, that now the Copenhageners can practice at home. And essentially this idea of how the clean technology of waste to energy can actually not only be better for the environment, but also be more enjoyable for the people that live in the city, we've called hedonistic sustainability. Somehow the idea that clean technology is not only better for the environment, it's also more enjoyable for the cities and buildings they produce. The first time we found this idea was 25 years ago. We created the Copenhagen Harbor Bath that sort of extends the life of the city into the water around it. We also designed the harbor bath in Aarhus. And when the harbor bath opened, it was kind of clear to us that something important was happening. You didn't have to drive your car for hours to get to Tisvilde or Hornbæk. You could actually jump in the water in the middle of the city. And that became this idea. It felt almost like a contradiction that most people would probably say that sustainability is about sacrifice, almost like the idea of cold showers in the morning to not waste the heat. But we thought, like, maybe there is a way where the environmentally progressive or friendly alternative is actually more enjoyable. And this kind of contradiction, you could call it an oxymoron, an idea that combines two seemingly mutually exclusive ideas into a new hybrid, I think is actually somehow at the core of almost all innovation. And I think a lot of the new technologies, a lot of the new business opportunities that occur around technology happen when you take two things that seem mutually exclusive and you combine them in interesting ways. And almost like a way to sum this up, you could call it utopian pragmatism. Because most people would say utopia is this literary concept of a place that is so perfect that it cannot exist in reality. And then pragmatism, on the other side, is actually looking at dealing with the world the way it is. And to combine those two things, utopian pragmatism actually allows you that every time you are invited to engage with the world, to accommodate certain activities, you try to make this little corner of the world like your dream world. You try to make this little corner of the world like the best possible, almost perfect little fragment of the world. And just a few examples. This is Vestra. It's a furniture factory in Norway. It's the cleanest, the most environmentally friendly factory in the world. It's built from locally sourced timber in the middle of the Norwegian forest. We negotiated with the fire department that we didn't have to chop more than 5 meters of trees around it, so the fire truck can get there. So that means that the people making the furniture, they're like working in the middle of the forest. The factory is built from locally sourced timber. The evergreen forest provides sun shading in the summer and allows daylight throughout the year. It's powered by geothermal. It's entirely built by mass timber, which means that even though this is a raw factory space, the surfaces you see are not concrete and steel. It's all like beautiful warm timber. There's no finish applied. It's the bones of the building. On the roof is planted with turf and photovoltaics. The turf is sourced locally. We even moved like elements from the bottom of the forest so that the amount of habitat is the same after the factory was completed than it was before. And you don't have to build an entire factory to make a statement about, being a good custodian of the environment. Our smallest project is a one-room hotel. Or let's say it's one room for humans and 300 rooms for birds. It's on the Arctic Circle in Lapland in Sweden. And you live there sort of fully immersed in habitat. You wake up in the morning to the tweeting of birds. You shower next to a squirrel. And you find yourself surrounded by nature in all directions, underneath you, around you, and above you. And this project is maybe like 27 square meters. But on the first month after it opened, the Tree Hotel in Luleå, it created 1 billion impressions around the world, because somehow this very small project had a kind of big idea that resonated with a lot of people. In the other end of the spectrum, we're building the new airport of Zurich, which will be the largest timber building on Earth. Locally sourced timber from the Swiss Alps. In almost a decade from now, when you get off the plane, you can sort of smell the alpine forest. It massively reduces the carbon footprint of the airport, and the entire roof is covered with photovoltaics to power 2/3 of the airport. The control tower is lifting up the skylight where everybody travel in multiple dimensions. So always when an architect announces a new building, we are concerned about what evil nickname is the building gonna get. And they called it the coffee pot, because it actually looks like an espresso machine, which can only be a good thing. For Google, we designed 9 buildings for their headquarters in Mountain View in North California. And it's located in this beautiful landscape on the Bay of San Francisco. And as you walk around the beautiful landscape, you see that there's like little basins. You can see like water flowing on different levels. And that's because all of the water that drops on the buildings is collected. It's used to irrigate the landscape for toilet flushing. And then all of the gray and black wastewater is actually cleaned in a root zone garden. So the beautiful landscape is not only nice to walk around in, it is also hard-working, turning wastewater into clean water before it's let into the bay. The spaces are covered in what the Googlers call dragon scales, photovoltaic tiles that almost look like traditional roof tiles, but they actually turn photons into electricity. Inside, the long spans are not like big rigid beams, but they're catenary curves hanging gently, because a catenary curve is the most materially efficient way to make a long span. So with very little steel, can we make these long spans that not only perform better, but also look more elegant. And then between them, you have these smiles, like clear stories, that let in the perfect amount of daylight to support the work of the Googlers. It's almost like a marketplace for collaboration and innovation. And actually, Gradient Canopy, the building you're looking at, is where Google now is doing all of their AI work. So somehow examples of how like our sustainable future not only can be like better to work in and more beautiful to live in, and not just better for the environment. In Sevilla, in the south of Spain, we just started building a building, and when we did the groundbreaking, it was 46 degrees. It's one of the hottest cities in Europe. So we designed the building inspired by Islamic architecture. So as this kind of canopy of photovoltaic panels that shade a public square. So on the public square, you have natural ventilation. It also means that we can make the facades to the European Commission so transparent that the citizens of Sevilla can actually see what the commissioners are doing. So again, this very simple idea reduces the thermal impact, but also in 18 years, the building will have produced so much energy that it completely offsets the carbon used to build the building. So in that sense, after 18 years, this building really becomes carbon negative. It leaves the planet better with less carbon in the atmosphere than before it was built. And as part of the process, together with Ursula von der Leyen and the EU, I was invited to meet Pope Francis and speak at the Vatican's Academy of Sciences. And Ursula von der Leyen had a sit down with the Pope. And if you ever have to visit the Pope and you're thinking about what to give him, he already has a framed photo of one of our buildings. So I'm not a Catholic, but I have a feeling if I was, this could be my ticket. So speaking of the Pope and the Vatican City, the Danish equivalent of the Vatican City, I think, would be Billund. This is one of my favorite photos. It's all the richest people in Denmark and me, because it's the family that makes Lego. And they invited us to imagine the home of the Lego brick. Of course, the architectural model was made out of Lego, the building itself. And we tried to imagine an architecture that would be as inviting and engaging as Lego is itself. So the roof is a series of interconnected playgrounds. You are free to roam around without a ticket. The building is open in all corners. You can go into the Lego square, where light passes in between the galleries above, and again, you can roam around without a ticket. And only when you go into the galleries, you need a ticket. And there it may be one of the only museums in the world where you are encouraged, invited to touch all the artifacts. And that's because Lego is not a toy. It's a tool that empowers the child to create his or her own world and then to inhabit that world through play and to invite her friends in joining her in co-creating and cohabiting that world. And you can say that, I think that speaks to the fundamentals of the power of architecture. The Danish word for design is formgivning, which literally means form giving, because to design something is to give form to that which has not yet been given form. In other words, to give form to the future. So every time we are being invited to imagine a new place or a new building or a new company or a new product, in your case, you have the possibility to give form to the future as you would want it to be. And maybe the last two examples, the first one, in a very little way, we're working with NASA and a company called Icon to imagine the technology with which we will build the first permanent human presence on the moon, using solar-powered lasers to melt moon dust into a kind of lunar obsidian, and then essentially send the lander with the solar-powered laser sinter printer, and then solidify regolith into the building material of the future human presence on the moon. Of course, on the moon you have to work with different circadian cycles, so it comes with a whole new set of rules because you're essentially working on with new physics. But another example, much closer to home, which is the last example I'd like to share, is Bhutan. 2 years ago, I met the king of Bhutan, and he invited me to come and visit his country because he had a vision to create a new city from scratch. He wanted to create a city that could attract international investments and local talent, because they're experiencing that even though it's the most sustainable country in the world, they capture twice as much carbon as they emit. They are suffering from a lot of the younger generations moving to Australia and Canada in the pursuit of economic opportunity. So we started trying to understand Bhutan. Bhutan is very different from Denmark, but the two countries are the same size. And Denmark is often ranked the happiest country in the world. Bhutan, they measure their success as a nation in gross national happiness. Both countries are powered by renewable energy, wind in Denmark and hydroelectricity in Bhutan. But then, of course, Bhutan is the most mountainous country in the world. Their main landmark, the Tiger's Nest, is literally nested on the side of the Himalayas. And obviously in Denmark, we only have one mountain, and we did it ourselves. Sort of summing up, we found a country that is incredibly green, 82% forest cover, 60% of it baked into national legislation. It's clean. All the agriculture and the energy is powered by the rivers that flow through it. They prioritize collective well-being above traditional economic parameters. And they have a very safe and uncorrupt system with good relations to their two big neighbors, China and India. So we thought, they're already measuring gross national happiness on 9 parameters of measures that are somehow based on Vajrayana Buddhist principles. So we thought, like, why don't we take those principles and we turn them into the urban design principles for the entire city? You know, supporting a healthy lifestyle, fostering spirituality, strengthening communities. So imagine the mindfulness city as a city that is shaped by the rivers that flow through it, that actually enhances nature and agriculture rather than displacing it, that is powered by the flow of the rivers, that is designed for collaboration and togetherness, and that has an administrative design, a legal framework designed to attract international investment and to retain local talent. So starting in the mountains, the city is powered by the Temple Dam. Then in the highlands, you have spaces for wellness, tourism, spirituality of various kinds. You have agrotech and forestry. Then you get to sort of education of various kinds, and then to sort of more typical urban functions supporting the main economies. And finally, of course, a dry port connecting to India and an airport connecting to the rest of the world. And currently, only 7 pilots are educated to land in Bhutan between the Himalaya mountains. Once we open the international airport, 5 billion people will have the possibility of direct flights to Bhutan. It could be the gateway to South Asia. We imagine the airport as this modular system made with local materials like timber and stone. And because the entire city also is covered by forests, we are bringing the tropical forests all the way down to the airport itself. So, and all the way into the airport. So when you arrive at the departure plaza, you are underneath a forest canopy. You're sort of shaded by the tropical trees. And when you enter into the airport itself, the forest follows you. So it will be the first and last impression you get of Bhutan. It's an entirely modular structure made with these kind of pitched roofs that somehow echo the traditional architecture of Bhutan. They have an incredibly alive, existing tradition for wood carvings and paintings of various kinds. Combining that with modern technology, we want the airport to somehow be let's say, anchored in the heritage and the past, but looking towards the future of the country. So imagine going through immigration in a forest, or when you arrive, you go and collect your luggage, which is normally the most depressing place in a building. But here you're like sitting right next to a forest, waiting for your suitcase to show up. I mean, in an ideal world, the biggest risk we have is that people don't want to leave the airport when they arrive. But essentially, somehow trying to take all these traditional elements of Bhutanese architecture and turn it into this kind of abstraction, almost like a man-made mountainscape. And then maybe lastly, the different elements of the city. It's shaped by the rivers that flow through it. You have the rivers serve as migration paths for the elephants. So the rivers essentially shape the paths. You have this kind of series of cascading terraces that move down. The city densifies towards India. And everywhere where the streets cross the rivers, they become like public buildings. So imagine a city that is made by river rocks, bamboo, wood, rammed earth, a city where the traditional architecture and the new architecture actually fits together instead of being in contrast, where agriculture is part of the public space, the thermal vents are part of the social life, and where the control of water becomes a social experience. So to contain the large rivers and the elephants, we have these major parks. You have canals for kayaking and swimming. You have habitat for the tropical elements. And for the tropical rains, the seasonal rains, some of the local parks become like rivers. And lastly, the bridges become like the landmarks. A Vajrayana bridge, where you can listen to spiritual masters as you cross from one side of the river to the other. A hospital bridge that bridges between Western and Eastern medicine. A university, a kid that goes to school in the morning starts fantasizing what he wants to become when he gets old. An agricultural bridge, a market bridge, and a manufacturing bridge. And of course, like, you have all these traditional elements like songs and stupas and temples. But in addition to the airport, we imagine two other elements that somehow capture the spirit of the mindfulness city. The first is a Vajrayana Buddhist center where people that go to Gelefu, and they're not Buddhists, but they want to understand. We've taken all the elements of the practice of Vajrayana Buddhism and turned it into an experience where you can sort of become well-versed in Vajrayana Buddhism without being a practicing Buddhist. And the very last, before I get thrown off the stage, is the entire city I mentioned is powered by hydroelectricity. So we designed the dam at the top of the city almost like a Bhutanese interpretation of an Indian stepwell. So made out of elements of different forms of colored concrete, so that you can actually descend down the face of the dam. Anyone who stood on top of the Hoover Dam and looked down and fantasized, what if I could climb down this man-made mountain? Well, in Bhutan, on the temple dam, you can actually descend down to the temple like a 21st century equivalent of the tiger's nest. And somehow, to me, it captures everything that we're trying to do in Mindfulness City, and also with Utopian Pragmatism, that it somehow turns engineering into art. It turns the infrastructure for energy into the infrastructure for spirituality. And somehow, I believe it could be for Bhutan what the Eiffel Tower is for France, or what the Sydney Opera is for Australia. So maybe on that note, this idea of utopian pragmatism that I think transcends architecture is really this idea of every time you have to, at the end of the day, the invitation you get is to solve practical problems for people's lives. But as you're doing that, that pragmatism can actually be yielded to create something almost utopian. Thank you.